Hi there, it's Denise Eckert from the Relaxation Lounge. And I love coming on here and sharing different techniques and ideas just to lower the stress in your life. And today I've got Tammy Gooler Loeb, who's a career and executive coach, a speaker, and an author who has served clients across many sectors and industries for over 2 decades. She focuses on career advancement, leadership development, and workplace culture. Tammy hosts a weekly podcast, Work from the Inside Out, showcasing the career transition stories of people who found more satisfying work. Her expertise has appeared in Harvard Business Review Ascend, Forbes, Newsweek, Fast Company, and the Boston Globe. So welcome, Tammy.
Thank you for having me, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I'd like to know what inspired you to start doing this work that you do.
Well, actually, I think, probably goes back a long way. I was always encouraged, even growing up, to think about what I wanted to do with my life in terms of something that would be satisfying and meaningful. My father was a school psychologist and a bit of a tennis nut. So he was always doing something he really enjoyed doing. He was a really good role model in that way. And my mother was a social worker and also uh, really enjoyed what she was doing. And so I think they always encouraged me to find meaning in what I was doing. And I would say that some of my earlier jobs post college were also things I sought meaning in. But sometimes, things didn't always go exactly as you plan them to be. And I found myself in a couple of different situations over the years where I found myself not feeling as fulfilled as I'd like to be. And I reached a point probably close to maybe late 30s, 40ish, where I said to myself, I really want to do something that helps other people find more meaning and fulfillment in their work. And I found coaching, and that really landed with me. So a lot of things I did before that, I really feel very good about, but I think it was more the organizational cultures that I was in. Sometimes I had bosses I worked under who I didn't work well with. So, it's for each person, it's something different. But for me, I think I needed to find something that really just sat well with me. And what really sat well with me is to help other people find something that sits well with them.
I love that because I've gone through the same thing. I've had the jobs where you just feel like the round peg in the square hole. And it
Mm.
causes a lot of stress in your life because you're not fulfilled. You end up being frustrated. And realistically, you spend a lot of time at work and you're not doing what you want to do, and that's really, really hard. And it's stressful. I found it very stressful.
I agree. And I think many of us, and I do think I'm the exception. I don't know. Although we all think we're the exception in some way or another, and we do find other people who've had similar experiences. But I do see a lot of people who are, pursuing careers and putting a lot of effort into either getting a certain skill set, education, climbing some kind of a ladder of advancement, and they put a lot of investment into it. And then they reach a point where they realize they're really not that happy. And they've put so much time into it, they feel as if they can't walk away from it. And there's tons of data out there too, studies that show that probably 60-65% of employees across cultures, across industries, are not feeling all that engaged in their work. As depressing as that sounds, there is a way out. There is a way to find more meaning and fulfillment in your work, whether it's staying where you are or moving on to something else. But we do get kind of stuck in this paradigm of, I've got, people I have to take care of, or I've put so much time into this already. How could I possibly, you know, change that. And so it's very hard sometimes for people to rethink that. And we get almost comfortable in our discomfort.
Yeah, it's true. And it's also the fear, it's a
Oh,
hard
yeah.
fear. So what do you mean by working from the inside out?
So what I mean by that is that I find that when we listen to that voice or those messages that are running through our minds or sometimes our hearts that are telling us what we really want. Sometimes it's very subtle. Sometimes it's running through us to the point where we're barely even acknowledging it consciously. But it's telling us what we really want. How often do we say to ourselves, "Oh, I should have listened to that gut instinct or that thought I was having back when I was trying to make that decision. And instead, I went with some other external opinion or some other common, wisdom that said, no, do it this way, do it that way." So that's what I mean by inside out. It's really our own wisdom, our own inner knowing of what is best for ourselves. And I don't say that lightly because there are lots of reasons why just going with that inner voice or, that gut feeling can feel like we're being maybe frivolous or maybe, just, not taking into account all the other very practical, logical matters that our more intellectual mind wants to listen to. And those are the more external factors. So I would say to that, yes, you have to listen to those as well. However, if you totally ignore that instinct that you have, you're probably heading down a path that is not going to benefit you in the long run. So I'm always recommending to people, listen to that inner voice, that gut instinct, and then balance that out with whatever external circumstances, forces, messages you're also hearing and have been influenced by. I'm not suggesting that people, throw all caution to the wind and empty out their bank accounts to follow their passions or their dreams. In fact, I don't even really believe that there is such a thing as, a dream job. I think a dream is just that. It's a dream. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some people out there who may be living their dream, as they put it. But I think that's something that I wouldn't suggest that people necessarily aim for, because sometimes a dream is like aiming for perfection. And when we aim for some kind of ideal, it's often something that is very hard to reach or isn't really realistic. So I suggest that you really blend what's going on inside of you and really listening to that and blending it with, well, what are my needs financially? What are the needs of the people that I have committed to taking care of? What are the things that are important to me besides finding something that I'll be happier at? And I think also the other thing that where fear plays a role is people think that they're going to make these changes overnight, when in fact, in some cases, it could take years to make the transition fully into something that might be more satisfying or meaningful, but it can be a process of moving towards that.
Well, I find too that, I know myself, I'm still transitioning into my business, and I do, construction work right now to pay the bills. But when I'm
Sure.
working with the construction, I'm thinking about my business because it's basically one paint job at a time, and
Mm-hmm.
it is paying my bills. And I make it, like, even yesterday I was painting an apartment and I had an audio book where I actually had my books there and I'm making notes while I'm listening. But there was just a different mindset that I have because it's a step in my direction.
Yep. I think that's a great point. Even if you are in the middle of a job or a place of work where you know it's not where you want to be, let's say 3, 5, 10 years from now. It's serving your needs right now. That's fine. And yet, if you have a plan moving towards something else and you're working on it, then it takes on a whole different meaning, what you're doing right now, because it is meeting your needs. And so that in and of itself has a different meaning and fulfillment for you than it did when you thought, well, is this all there is?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that show, the series Made on Netflix. And
I have not.
yeah, she's a maid and she's going back to school. And she's like, well, I'm cleaning one toilet at a time and it's pushing me ahead. And you know what? What she said there just stuck in my head. It was so true, you know.
Oh, I'm going to check that out now. I'm glad you mentioned that.
It's
Yeah.
awesome. It's a really good show. Now, if
Oh,
someone is a little apprehensive of what they're doing and they're scared to do their dream jobs or their dream careers, what are some of the first steps that they can take to get on board?
right. I'm glad you asked that. So I think that when you're afraid, it's usually well, one thing that usually is at play here is that you don't have enough information. So fear often needs to be it needs to be dissipated or diluted, let's say. And fear can come into two forms also. Let's back up for a moment. So in my book, my first chapter is all about fear. The whole book actually is about fear, but not that the book isn't the underlying theme of the book is fear, because fear is what often keeps people stuck. And so I address a lot of the stuck points and how people have moved beyond getting stuck. But fear can be your friend or your foe. So when we talk about fear, we usually talk about the foe, the part of fear that keeps you stuck. And oftentimes when people are feeling that fear, it's because there's some information or pile of information that they don't have yet. And so they can't see their way clear to something that they really want. They can't see the path. The path is not clear. When fear is your friend, sometimes you begin to see that path. And it might still feel scary, but it also feels kind of exciting. And you start to see what's possible. It's still scary though, but we've all had that feeling of, gee, I'd love to give this a try. Ooh, it gives you that little excited, jittery feeling. It's still fear, but it's a more positive, excited feeling. And so I always suggest people should notice that feeling and then start taking some steps through the fear rather than letting the fear stop you. And I think the first big step is get more information. And there are a number of ways to do that. So start asking some questions. What are some of the key questions that are holding you back? And write them down. Start talking to people who you think might be able to point you in the right direction, whether it's because you think they have the actual answers or because they might know people who do have the answers. The other place that I suggest that people go, and they often don't think of this, is to pay a visit to your local public library. Reference librarians in general, are trained in very special ways to uncover information in ways that most of us cannot or are not thinking in that way. They really do have a certain way of uncovering things. And this is what they do. This is what they're great at. They're not going to Google to get their information. They have all kinds of resources. And we are, they are usually paid, whether you're in the US or Canada, they are paid by our tax dollars. And so they are there to help us do this. And there's some amazing librarians out there who can really point you in some great directions. So I say, start talking to people, ask them about different topics you're interested in, or perhaps it's companies or professions. Maybe it's a professional association where you can go to their website, look up more information, get more information, and get a lot of it, because there's usually more things that you will discover and uncover as you go and dig deeper, and you'll start to see where that pathway starts to clear for you.
I love that because, I mean, we all have that fear. And what was the thing? I just had to look this up, but fear is false evidence appearing real. And once you start doing that research and talking to people, fear tickles away and it gets into that excitement of fear, as you were saying. I love that. When you're doing
like that,
something
tickles the way. That's great.
So how does your book help people? Is it a workbook, or is it something that people can use to work through?
Yes. So it's a both and. So the book is organized in 9 chapters, and each chapter focuses on a particular obstacle that is typical for a lot of people when they get stuck. So, for example, one of the chapters is called "It's Never Too Late," because I find that there are people, who are still right in the middle of their careers, and they'll say, "It's too late. I can't go back to school now," or "I've put too many years already into this. I cannot, leave it by the wayside." All kinds of reasons. Or, "I have too many people I'm taking care of, kids to put through school," whatever it is. "I couldn't possibly change jobs right now." Or, "I hate networking. I don't want to network. I'm an introvert," whatever it is. So then because a lot of people do understand that networking, making connections, talking to people is a very, very effective approach to getting the information you need and finding your next opportunity. And I have some interesting ideas about networking that don't involve shaking hands, handing out business cards, and going to large events. So that's another piece. But the book is organized to address a lot of the common obstacles. And then at the end, so within each chapter, there are 2 to 3 stories of very real people whose stories really exemplify how they found their way through to their next opportunity that was more meaningful for them under the same circumstances that often hold people back. So those are great examples of people. Most of them are people I've interviewed on my podcast. Some of them are people that I've known over the years in my life. And then at the end of each chapter, there is a set of questions that really offer an opportunity to be reflective, and another set of guiding activities. So there's an opportunity to reflect and think things through, but then there's also some action items that you can take that can take you to the next step. At the very end of the book, there's a comprehensive resources section that offers a lot of different areas that people can explore, whether it's books, podcasts, organizations that can be helpful, and other resources, so that you can really start to put one foot in front of the other and move into the process. The other thing I can offer your listeners is a workbook that is a compilation of all those reflective questions, guiding activities, plus some bonus activities that are not in the book. And I'm sure we can offer a link in the show notes for that, but it's through my website, tammygoolerloeb.com/workbook. And if people go to that link, they will be able to sign up and access a PDF of that bonus workbook. And that's a great way for people to work through a lot of the questions and activities that are in the book, plus some extras. So it's a free gift for your listeners. So there's a lot of ways to use the book. The other thing I want to point out is that the book is not written in a way that requires you to go through it from chapters 1 through 9. I recommend that people read the introduction and chapter 1, but then after that, they can decide which chapters or which chapter titles appeal most to them and just choose a few chapters and read them. There's no need to read it, in order, because each chapter really stands on its own.
Well, it sounds amazing. And I love the idea when you put in real stories, because there's always little nibbles here and there that you pull out that you can relate to. So I find that really important.
Yeah, and I think some of them are relatable, for different people. I also, my hope was that these stories in general would show people what's possible. And everyone's circumstances are different, that hopefully the stories will inspire people to see what's possible for them under their own circumstances in their own lives. Because some of the people who I profile in the book were able to, for example, go back to school, at the age of 40 or 50, and they had the financial resources to do that. Now, some people would say, no, I can't, I don't have the money. But in the back of the book, I have a section that talks about financing education and some resources that can help people think that through as well. So I don't have all the answers to that, but I do think that there are a variety of ways to further yourself, to get the credentials you need or the skills you need to move into new areas, without just without shutting the door and saying, well, I just can't. That's not true. There are lots of people who have found their way to their next best thing by trying different things. And I think the more open and curious people stay, they will find their way.
Absolutely. And the thing is, people don't realize as well is that there's a lot of transferable skills. You can be doing this, and you can be working on a chicken farm and you can go into accounting. Well, if you counted chickens, that's still doing math. It's a crazy example, but, once you start doing that research and sitting down, you do realize the transferable skills that you have.
Absolutely. And then, when you see some of the examples in the book, not that I'm just talking about the book, but the book is a great place for people to look. My podcast too, lots of examples of people who did exactly that and were able to step into a new industry or a new area of work using transferable skills. And what was key about that, or what I noticed about a lot of those people, because it would be easy to say, well, they were just lucky, they just were at the right place at the right time, sort of serendipity. Well, it looks that way on the outside. It looks magical, but when you really unpack their stories, you can see there were many building blocks along the way. There were things that they did along the way. There were relationships that they nurtured. There were ways in which they stayed open and wildly curious about things. And when they showed up in various situations, in relationships with people, or in other kinds of situations where they showed up as curious and interested, people were attracted to that, and people were willing to give them a chance. And I've noticed that was a huge key to them stepping into areas where they would tell you, they hired me even though I did not know what I was doing. And I've seen it over and over and over again.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap this up, Tammy. Now, what are your final words of wisdom to the audience?
My final words of wisdom are, if you are considering making a change, even if you're not sure, but you would like to at least think about it, I encourage you, definitely get more information, think about it. And the most important thing to keep in mind is, do not do it alone. Make sure that you have some people in your corner, people that you can chat with and talk with, people who know you, like you, respect you, and have faith in you. And know that, you have those people to bounce ideas around with, or who can just encourage you in those moments where maybe you're feeling a little discouraged, or you're thinking, oh, why am I bothering? Always have someone in your corner.
Yes, that's very important. So wherever you're listening or watching this, I will put all of Tammy's information, her contact information in. So if you have any questions or you want to talk to Tammy further, please feel free to reach out and talk to her. And thank you so much, Tammy. Great information.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the really great questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tammy. It was a pleasure. Well, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. If you're looking for more ways to reduce the stress in your life, please visit www.therelaxationlounge.info. Here I've got access to a free Facebook page where you can get support, information on the podcast where I interview different individuals who share their techniques to help you reduce your stress, plus a membership that you can join where you can come and do stress-reducing practice on demand anytime you need to reduce the stress in your life and create more happiness in your world. I'll see you in the lounge.